2021 has to be one of the most unremarkable years for comic books for me, at least from DC and Marvel. It felt like I don't know, like DC and Marvel have been like this weird position lately, and it felt like we had a really good thing going, especially from DC, and it just slowly started to deteriorate and fall apart at the seams, and it was just so weird. Like, for example, DC Rebirth started with Brian Hitch on Justice League, and not being a fan of his other Justice League book, I'm like, okay, alright, let's see what he does with this one. He wrote an unremarkable era. And then Scott Snyder comes in, and his story seems to sort of kind of be teasing with the idea set forth in Rebirth. But then it sort of goes off the rocker, but it goes off the rocker in a Scott Snyder way. In other words, it's big, bold, a bit unnecessary in some places, but you never find yourself bored or uninterested in the glorious train wreck that he sometimes has. That's what I like about Scott Snyder. It's never a dull moment, and it's rarely ever bad. Death Metal wasn't bad. And then Brian Michael Bendis comes in with his Justice League, and I just couldn't. I just couldn't. Just like with his Action Comics, just like with Superman, just like with Young Justice, I just couldn't. And then Batman. Tom King comes in on Batman. He has a decent start. He tends to go some questionable choices in the beginning. I'm like, okay, not exactly to my taste, but I see what you're doing. Then he sort of went full Tom King, which means that if he goes past like 13 issues, he tends to go a bit too far. And then we had stuff, the I Am Bane story. It's just so weird. But then Tinian comes in, and Tinian, how could we go wrong with Tinian? He was a great guy. Scott Snyder spoke highly of him, and then he did great work on Justice League Dark, and fun work on Detective Comics. Then they gave him Batman. And what did he do with Batman but tell the same story 2 times in a row? What is Joker? What is Joker War, if not just another version of Fear State? In its own way, it is. City's been held hostage. A bunch of side characters take precedent over the story over Batman. Great artwork. Gotham City held hostage for what seems to be the 99th time. With 100, does everyone get a free toaster? Could we stop destroying Gotham City? How was Gotham City destroyed more times than Metropolis? I mean, really. Really, I don't get that. The insurance rates must be through the roof in Gotham. I don't know. And then Wonder Woman, from Rebirth with Greg Rucka. Rucka comes in and just sort of establishes a new status quo. Sadly, he didn't stay for more than 30 issues. And after he left, it's just been fumbling around. Is the new era good? I don't know. I haven't had time to check. Green Lantern came in great with Peter Tomasi and Robert Venditti. Great work by those two. We're talking about Venditti's Green Lantern at some point. Then there's nothing. Grant Morrison comes in with his own little out-of-continuity thing, because he's Grant Morrison. He gets that perk. And then Jeffrey Thorne comes in, and with maybe 2 or 3 issues, I'm like, not necessarily for me. I'll pick up the trade. I still haven't picked that up, but I will. And that's just sort of the vibe among all the Rick Graysons and weird approaches to continuity and lackluster writers coming into big titles and really only feeling like even the really good ones are there just to promote new characters, hoping that they'll be in other books later on. So therefore they'll get a little bit extra of the green. And everyone wants to create their own Harley Quinn now. And Marvel is nowhere near as innocent as this. Marvel suffers a problem when nothing they do seems to interest me. Even Doctor Strange, who might be one of my favorite characters in Marvel. His best book is about him being dead. And he's not even dead in it. A version of himself comes in and says, I'm here to help you solve the murder. And instead of it being a very well thought out passing of the torch, a way for us to appreciate the character, it's just, eh. And Thor is doing Thor things, and Avengers has sort of worked mine. Jason Aaron has been doing too much at Marvel. The only person I can trust now is Chip Zdarsky. And every now and then I reach into the bag and see what Dan Slott's doing and what Hickman's X-Men is doing. But none of it seems important enough for me to just talk about. although I do kind of miss doing weekly reviews. That does not mean that there was nothing that I enjoyed this year for comics. So far from it, far from it. It was just weird that this entire year, very few things came from what was currently being put out. And even more so because by the metrics we use, it has to be an exceptionally good book for me to say, well, it has to do more than 3 issues, for me to talk about it for like a favorite book of the year. But anyway, let's talk about our favorite reads of 2021. To save us some trouble, we'll talk about some stories we revisited. We revisited Yu Yu Hakusho, Inuyasha, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Because why not? There was nothing else going on from anyone else. So Yu Yu Hakusho, written by Yoshiro Togashi, Inuyasha, written by Rumiko Takahashi, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Written by Kazuki Takahashi. This isn't a triumvirate. This isn't any equivalent of the quote-unquote Big Three, because there actually is no equivalent to the Big Three. There just isn't for anime and manga. There isn't. I'm sorry. But these stories were just fun. As someone who'd watched the anime for all 3 of them pretty heavily, it was interesting. It was also weird that I'd never read them before. At least not all the way through, at least in multiple sittings. There were still things in Yu-Gi-Oh! I'd missed. I always forget there's like an entire arc of Yu Yu Hakusho that never quite made it out, because by the end of Yu Yu Hakusho, by the Three Kings Saga, Togashi was kind of done. He was kind of done. It was a rare thing to see. Even wrote an apology letter for it. It was weird. And Inuyasha is one of those series where the manga is definitely better because you can't hear it. You can't hear the yelling in the manga. If you've watched Inuyasha, you know what I mean when I say you can't hear the yelling. Overall, these were nice trips down memory lane, and it's made me... There's some special projects coming next year because of that. Anyway. Next, there was Witch Hat Atelier, written by Kamome Shirahama, and drawn, as tends to happen with manga. This story is fun. If you remember the magical girl genre, it's not dead. It's not a genre I tend to look to. Something like Card Captors, Tokyo Mew Mew, I think. Magical Do Re Mi. Kind of the best I like out of that's Card Captors. That's not just because of that opening.
Card Captors, a mystic adventure. Card Captors, a quest for all time. Each card possesses a power all its own. We've got to find them to bring the power home.
But also, it was just fun series. Also, to read, it was all right. But this series here, Witch Hat, to me, sort of encapsulates exactly what I'm looking for in a magical girl series. Even Sailor Moon doesn't quite capture what I would go for the magical girl series. This one seems to be a bit more in-depth about magic and how it works, and actually studying magic. You know, as opposed to every other magical girl series, especially Sailor Moon. It's like, here's a power-up. Here's a power-up. Oh, you were sad for a bit? You better now? Here's a power-up. By the way, the Sailor Moon manga is really, really weird and not that good, but you can't help but look at it. Coco in Witch Hat is she's a fun, endearing character. I love her for it. And the rest of the cast are great. Quifrey, was it just Qfrey? I don't know. I forget. But overall, this was a really great series to read. Oddly enough, I'd been reading it. I read it as a recommendation on a podcast I'd heard. But yes, this was a really great series. I love it. Magic, kids learning about themselves, and evil witches. Like, when's the last time we had proper evil witches? Make witches evil again. Don't make them sickly green, though. That's a horrible stereotype. We need to move past. Next is Batman White Knight featuring Harley Quinn. So, Sean Gordon Murphy has been the most standout Batman writer in a good while, in my opinion. And I haven't felt like this excited for a Batman story since I started reading Scott Snyder. And because that also got me into reading more Batman. That's a good thing about Scott Snyder's Batman run. It gets you to read more. Kings and Tinians really didn't incentivize you to read more. It incentivized you to read better, which is good in its own way. But Sean Gordon Murphy's Batman, from White Knight to Curse of the White Knight and now here, really helped create like its own special universe, the Murphyverse as it's called now. This story here really deals with Harley moving on from the events of White Knight, which is, a sane Joker, moving on with her coming back into his life, him coming back into her life. And this story here sort of tells the real story of how they met. Well, the quote-unquote real story. How does the story work with something like Stan Szejewic's Harleen? It doesn't work. Again, it's its own continuity story, but this story is in its own way great, but at the same time I think it sort of humanizes the Joker in a way that I don't think works, or maybe it just humanizes who Joker used to be. And that's always been an interesting question when it comes to Joker's past. Maybe this story doesn't need to happen because it gives an answer to Joker, which I don't think is ever needed or necessary. But this fleshes out Harley Quinn in a way that I don't think's ever really been done. Actually, it doesn't flesh out Harley Quinn. It fleshes out Harley and Quinzel. And I think that's always been a problem Harley has had as a character, is when does Harleen end and Harley Quinn begin? And later comics have always tried to explore the idea, well, at some point after leaving the Joker, she becomes like a fusion of the two. And I'm like, that sounds like we're just trying to have our cake and eat it too. And to a company's credit, that's what they should always try to do. But I don't think it serves the character well. It serves the readers well. And even then it doesn't do it well. I've always said that Harley and Batman used badly as sort of low-hanging fruit. Like, put Batman's name on a book. People will read it. Put Harley Quinn in an event. Well, I enjoyed Harley. And Sean Gordon Murphy sort of says, well, no, just because it's a Batman story doesn't mean it's not obligated to be good, or that we shouldn't try to make it good. Sean Gordon Murphy said, well, you know what, this story can't be told in continuity. It can't be told in the main line. I'm not sure if he was ever offered that, but it's so great because it's outside of the main line. And that's what's been happening a lot now with DC, and I think even Marvel to an extent. A lot of their best stories are coming out of continuity, coming out of the established status quo. Like, no, let's just take what we like about the character and tell an entirely unique story. And that's sort of what a lot of anime live action adaptations, I think, should be trying to do. Just tell the story, but make important, well thought out creative choices that honor the story and the characters therein. And that's hard. Next comes Superman 78. So Superman has been in a weird spot since Tomasi and Dan Jurgens left. I'll say it. Again, like I said earlier, Brian Michael Bendis, I don't know what he thought he was doing. He done goofed it. If you liked it, that's great. I envy you. But this isn't what I was looking for in a Superman story. And Bendis sort of forces you to read better Superman stories, not more Superman stories. Superman 78, written by Robert Venditti, is a continuation of Richard Donner's Superman. And that is hilarious. I was surprised to realize that wasn't already a thing. I could have sworn someone had already decided to do that. I mean, this literally picks up in that time frame, in that era. Everyone looks like how they did in the Dawn of Superman. This is definitely Christopher Reeve's Superman. Alright, this looks just like him. Same goofy, super Boy Scout look and everything. And this story here feels like it feels like one big movie. Like, there's no, hey, this is a little side story. Like, no. It's like, so if we had the budget now, what story would we tell with Dawn of Superman? And like, Brainiac. That's right, Brainiac's here. Planets and bottles. Is Krypton here? Is Krypton not here? How does Lois feel? How does Lex feel? Lex feels insulted that he didn't get a chance to show off how smart he was. That's it. And it's just a fun ride. It's just really, really fun. And I can't recommend it enough. If you have not been endeared by the recent Superman stories, whether it be Bendis' attempts or Tom Taylor's attempts with John, this, I think, is the book for you. It's a bit goofier because it's Dawn of Superman, Superman 78. You know what you're looking to. But otherwise, it's a really fun moment. Now, we've got two more. One is Batman Venom by Denny O'Neil. The late Denny O'Neil. Really sad his passing. I'll admit, I tend to stay away from older stories because the art doesn't always gel with me. I'm like, I don't really like this art. But wherever you go in any comic book group, and you look like, I want a Batman title to read, Batman Venom will be one of the stories you will see recommended. And I didn't get it because last time I read a book that was highly recommended, it was The Killing Joke. And I'm not going to lie, didn't love it. I mean, I get it. It's well written. It's a great story, sort of, especially in the context of the time period it came out in. But maybe because it was so overhyped, I just didn't get it. I'm like, okay. All right, and the animated movie, sure, ignoring the whole Batgirl thing, I'm sorry, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill have done better dialogue in the Batman animated series. I'm sorry, they've done better performances. They've had better stuff to work with. This, no, no, no. But Batman Venom is amazing, in my opinion. Probably because it's not as well talked about, so I didn't have any weird expectations. But I never knew what it was about. Someone said, well, it's Batman dealing with addiction. I'm like, that sounds kind of dull. But looking back on, especially now, with everything is about, like, let's deconstruct his relationship with the Joker. Let's, have him question why he's doing this. Let's break him down emotionally for no real reason and with no real thought to building him back up. Danny Neal came and said, well, let's set up the premise for him starting an addiction, which, he's on Venom, or the sort of the prelude to Venom, which also helps set up Nightfall and Bane. And the setup for this is he was not strong enough to save a little girl. And so he now needs to do better. He now has to be better. And this is something Batman's always trying to do, trying to be a better crime fighter. So for one moment, he takes the shortcut. And he takes, steroids, drugs, whatever you want to call it. And he's stronger, but it starts to send him down the dark path of addiction. And there's a really great scene when he finally hits rock bottom. When he calls Alfred, and he's in tears. And he is saying he needs help. And that is not something you see enough anymore. That level of vulnerability is something you don't see anymore in comics. At least not to this extent. And I can't recommend enough after that. Like, there were some other older Batman stories I was reading, not as old as that one, but really good Batman stories. But this one just stood out. I had to take a break from Batman. It was that good. Like, I've got plenty of other Batman stories on my backlog. But yeah, there was another book to read, one that I started reading and then put on the back burner. And this was Strange Adventures by Tom King. And I know we just talked about Tom King earlier in our 5-minute unnecessary rant, or whinge fest if you want to call it. And as I said, Tom King, if you give him a small pool to play in, he will do good things. Right? Give him one character with not necessarily a lot of history, or at least not a lot of current history, and he can do some good stuff. His patient interviews in Heroes in Crisis are still the best part about Heroes in Crisis. Mr. Miracle was a good story. A lot of people make fun of, like, the whole Darkseid eating a carrot thing. But I think he is at home with those series, with those 12-issue runs. And Strange Adventures was that. Strange Adventures, the story of Adam Strange and his sort of the war hero story. The war hero coming home, he's a major celebrity, and then it starts coming out that he may have done some less than savory things during the war, which results in him being accused of murdering someone who accused him of that stuff. So he acts as Justice League to investigate, and they put Mr. Terrific on the case, and we sort of unravel what happened during Adam Strange's time against the forces of Pick, I don't know, whatever they're called. And maybe there's some greater content here in this story, but I don't really care. It was a fun story. Adam Strange he's not necessarily an engaging character, he's a fascinating character, because you never quite know whether he did or didn't do those things until the very end. And Mr. Terrific, who has been a greatly underappreciated character, primarily because I don't think DC knows what to do with him outside of the JSA. They try. I think his worst attempt was Future's End. That was not Mr. Terrific. I'm sorry. No. But his New 52 book, I think, was close to him, was close enough to his character. The Terrifics did it. He's essentially DC's Mr. Fantastic, but less egotistical, which I think sort of hurts him more than it helps him. But he's also the third smartest person in the DC universe, so he doesn't have a lot of room to, brag. Bronze medalist is still better than just about all but 2 other people, so screw it. But yeah, this story it's an interesting read. I think that's the best way to sum it up. Like, you go through this, and I don't think at any point would you find yourself bored by this, but you're kind of wondering what's going on. You even start to think that maybe someone else did this. But yeah. So, yeah, Strange Adventures, if you haven't read it, you should read it now. It's a really good book. And finally, this one is the last one because I was very surprised by it. I read it on a whim. Star Wars issue 19. It's under the new Disney canon, and I've had a love hate. I've had more of a less of a love and hate relationship. Honestly, it's more of an indifference. Like, I'm kind of unimpressed by Disney Star Wars. I just am. I know everyone loves it. I know a lot of people love it. I just haven't gotten into it. So I read this and like, okay, that bounty hunter story is apparently over, and I don't care about bounty hunters. I'm sorry. And this story here got me like, oh my god, I have to read more. So Luke is continuing his Jedi training after the events of Empire Strikes Back, where he was disarmed. And how this issue ends is it's amazing how this issue ends. Like, I kind of have to do a separate video on it, and I still won't tell you how it ends in that one, but I'll tell you the setup in that one. But this issue was enough to get me to read Star Wars again. I'm actually going to go and read the Bounty Hunter arc again. But yeah, that's always a nice feeling when you read something that says, I gotta catch up, I gotta get caught up. And yeah, that's it. So yeah, the sad thing about this is I'm reading Marvel, I'm reading DC, and none of the stuff I've announced is from any of their main titles, any of the stuff that they should be actively promoting, putting their best people on. Alright, Jason Aaron is still on Avengers, trying to convince you it's an alright time. I'll meet him halfway. I'll read the trades. Same with Thor, same with Fantastic Four with Dan Slott, same with Green Lantern by Jeffrey Thorne. I'll even take a deep breath, and read Bendis' Justice League as a trade. It'll take a lot for me to read his Superman in Action Comics. I'm not doing that to myself. But yes, that is what I have read, that I've enjoyed profoundly. Like, there's no heap big buyer's remorse. Like, no, this was it. This was great. So, yes, that's enough rambling for now. If you are new to the Bucket Think Tank, if you like, comment, share, subscribe, let me know what your favorite reads were this year, or your least favorite, and I'll get back to you next year. This is the Bucket Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching. As always, may your fandom serve you well.